Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the class, both to new and long-time students and lovers of history. This is History with Sire here today to discuss with you our new topic on the US civil rights. Now, this is going to cover an overview of the American civil rights, and we're going to go right back to roughly the beginning of it in 1789 up to 1917. It's important to remember that this is going to be a lesson catered towards the student level, and the content will provide us some key knowledge and, of course, perhaps some historical skills along the way and throughout the series going forward. So with that in mind, notepads and pens at the ready, and let us begin. So indeed, we're going to be focusing on the US civil rights system. I'm really going to be taking it up right from what I say at the start, and I'm going to go in this short video series up to 1917. Once the introductory series is complete, we're then going to go forward into the American civil rights movement, the 20th century, and explore the civil rights movement at that time. So with that in mind, the first we have to do, of course, is understand what exactly do we mean by civil rights, and then going forward, how it really applies to America, and get ourselves a bit of a background about America and its own domestic scene. This one is going to be, rather than a depth study, we're going to do a breadth study about it. What we're going to look for is key changes over time that happened to the American civil rights movement, and principally, how civil rights was actually achieved for the Americans, and especially the African American community who fought so hard and so long to get their rights. So as I said, there's going to be some key questions that we're going to cover throughout the series. First, we need to understand what we actually mean by civil rights. Like, what are we actually trying to achieve at this time? What is the American dream? What is the distinctly American thing that really applies to the civil rights movement in this nation? And why, in some ways, it's quite unique amongst all the civil rights activism we have throughout the world. Because there are many other places. Britain, of course, had its own actions to do with its own tackling with the transatlantic slave trade when it was building its empire. South Africa is a very famous one with its apartheid movement, but yet America's one. It's quite unique because of the American dream that encapsulates it. But we're also going to be considering how America was a Herrenvolk and became one for so long. This is a term many of you might not be familiar with, or maybe those of you who have studied Nazi German history might have some familiarity with. What is a Herrenvolk? It's this idea, usually of an ethnic group that is considered a master race that is supreme and should have better privileges and rights than those that are beneath it. In America's case, there are strong proponents in historiography that argue America was indeed a Herrenvolk democracy, and this idea where one ethnic group dominated the other, which in the case of America was the whites, especially the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant groups, especially in the southern states. We also need to understand how the American political system actually works. We are going to get into some complex legislation as this series goes on, and we really need to make sure we understand it as we move forward. So first off, we have to define a very important thing, which is the American dream and the civil rights that we look for. So first off, what exactly is the American dream? Well, it's a concept that has existed in America for quite some time, but popular memory found its official name a bit more recently than the 1700s. It actually came about in a famous book by historian James Adam, who wrote about the Epic of America in 1931. He said the American dream was not a dream of mere material plenty, but it was a dream where one could grow to their fullest potential, whether a man or a woman, and they should be unhampered by the rigid social structures that they find themselves in. This really becomes quite popular after the Second World War in 1945, when there's a big boom and many Americans really buy into that they're believing in the dream and that indeed it can be achieved. But America, it doesn't fully allow for this. We're going to find as we go through the series, there's a clear, blatant inequality among its people. And that's why I think it's really important to consider the second question there, which is, does the American dream really mean for all Americans? Is it an American dream, or is it still favoring one racial group or one type of wealth class over another? We're also going to explore throughout the series the government itself, especially the federal government, and how actually they could do something to help ensure this dream is achieved. And a key question we're going to find ourselves the government's going to wrestle with is this responsibility. Is it their job to make sure every American achieves the dream, or because of the libertarian values that enshrine in America's own constitution, within its own political system, that maybe it's up to the American individual themselves to try and achieve that dream? But many people have argued over the decades, over the centuries, that America should be designed where it must be possible, and it's the government's jobs to make sure it's possible. So, second off is the American political system itself. What are we actually talking about? When I'm saying federal government, what does that actually encompass? Well, it includes three key things. The first one is what's called the judicial system or the judiciary, and this represents the Supreme Court. This is the highest court in the United States of America, and this is the one that can declare laws either illegal or legal, and it also can make decisions if they are constitutional or not. It's made up of judges, and these judges are picked by the president, and they're voted on by Congress, and they serve for life once they are appointed. However, as I say, because they can declare laws constitutional, they can also declare laws unconstitutional as well. What do I mean by that fancy term constitution? Well, when, of course, America was created, it was created with this idea of a US Constitution in mind, and that everyone was going to have this idea of life, liberty, and happiness, and it should be achieved. And so it's the court's job to ensure that the laws that they make do follow that Constitution, and therefore can indeed ensure Americans can achieve their dreams. The other branch is the legislative or the legislature, and this is made up of Congress. There are two key parts of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. They come together and they form what we call the Congress. They are the ones who actually make these laws, and to ensure the laws are actually passed, both the Senate and the House have to actually pass them. This one has regular elections, whereas the court, the president elects them into power and they serve for life. The Congress have more regular election cycles. This is where you have your federal elections and also your midterm elections as well. They are elected separately to the president. And that's what we need to consider here. Powers, the balance of power in America is split among these branches, so no one branch can have more control than the other. And that leaves us with the final branch, which is the executive or the president. The president is the head of state and the army. You may hear them naturally called the commander in chief. They're in charge of the nation's foreign policy. They have a very regular election cycle. To date, they have been elected every 4 years, and this has never ever changed. They're a single person, but they also have a secondary, a vice president, who is also elected on their ticket as well and serves alongside them. Should the president ever die while in office, the vice president is the one who tends to be enshrined straight away to ensure the nation always has a leader, always has a commander in control. We'll get into more about the president's rules and laws as time goes on. As I said, though, there are some unique powers with these. We have the court, who can declare laws constitutional or unconstitutional. You have the president, who has a very powerful ability to veto laws that the Congress may pass. And as I say, they can already appoint the judges onto that Supreme Court. The Congress can actually ignore a veto if two-thirds of its members agree and vote for such. And actually, they have the power to challenge not only the Supreme Court, but also the president as well and try and remove them from office as best as they can. One of the more popular ways that's been tried to be done is through impeachment. Several presidents over the years have faced this. America's political system doesn't start and end with these three branches. It also has a ripple throughout, and it goes throughout all of its nation states, both when it first started and now in the modern times of the 21st century. There are dozens and dozens of states, over 50 of them, and so each of them has their own similar style of government. They all, in theory, should answer to the federal government, where the president, the Supreme Court, and Congress make up. But they also have their own governors happens in their own states, and these state governments, as I say, are ruled by a governor, and we're going to see over the years how these states will have their own way of how they want to run themselves and will challenge what the federal government wants them to do. And this balance and separation of powers system really comes into play as the federal government and the state governments come into conflict over certain issues. And one of those big issues is indeed civil rights. But how about that civil rights? How will things change? How will this issue come to play? Well, we're going to find out more about that in the following video. So do make sure you're subscribed and keeping track of this video series as we go through it. Again, I really hope you found this useful, found it insightful for you. Again, it's just a background series, just giving us a little bit of a background about civil rights, about the American dream, and about the American political system we're going to go into and explore together. So with that in mind, I will see you in the following video where we go into the actual context now, go through the civil rights progression in its early years and how things change over time. Thank you as always for watching. This is History with Sire. Thank you for listening.